That was a report from Kano, put together in respect to this raging debate over the Ramadan school shutdown, which has generated a lot of reactions, from stakeholders. Just like you heard in that report, there are divergent opinions and views in respect to the necessity or otherwise of this decision or this policy implementation. While we await Dr. Dr. Mohammed Lawal, the Bauchi State Commissioner of Education, to join, and also in-house studio, Dr. Suleiman Suleiman. We would be giving you some of the rundown in respect to this controversy. So far, 4 states in Nigeria, northern Nigeria in particular, implementing this decision or this policy, to shut down schools pending the completion of the Ramadan fast. These states are, as we said earlier, Bauchi, Kano, Katsina, and Kebbi. And the concerns actually stem from the fact that, incidentally, also these states are some of the states that are, below the, or rather at the top in terms of the out of school children. They account for 44% of the total out of school figures in Nigeria. And of course, many believe that taking such a decision may undermine, the efforts to speed up, the race to catch up with other states who have advanced in terms of education and so on. And of course, also it is taken another religious dimension with the involvement of key religious bodies, CAN, which has kicked against this decision, saying that there is no justification for it. One, for the fact that the states, largely states that are considered, below average or below the ladder in terms of educational development. Also, they are also looking at the need for fairness. There's need for equity and justice in terms of the implementation of the policy. But quite a number of the states have been defending their decision. I read, a couple of minutes ago, Katsina State also defending the decision, saying that it has put in place certain measures to ensure that there is minimal disruption and so on. It also cited the fact that this is not the first time such a decision is taken. Of course, it is part of the laws of the state, which should be respected, and all of that. And then in the meantime, or rather in a short while, we'll also be hearing from the Commissioner of Education in Bauchi, Dr. Mohammed Lawal, who will be joining us to provide insights as to why the state decided to take this decision. But on a general note, education, is quite fundamental in the development trajectory of any nation, and that perhaps why it is taking, or rather, it is getting the attention of critical stakeholders. The northern part of the country, as we are aware, many believe is educationally disadvantaged, considering the so many numerous factors, that have come to play. And of course, looking at education as one of the critical indices in terms of development, many are worried over this Ramadan school shutdown. But then we'll get to hear from all the critical stakeholders. Just like I said earlier, Dr. Suleiman Suleiman will be joining us in the studio. He wrote a very compelling, piece recently concerning this raging debate over the shutdown of, the schools in Ramadan, and what it portends, for a region already struggling to recover, if you like, or to catch up with other regions in terms of education development and so on. So we'll be taking a short break. Perhaps when we return, by then guests must have joined us now to begin the conversation. Stay tuned. The program is Daily Politics, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you very much for staying with us on Daily Politics. And just like I said earlier, Right now we have our studio guest talking about Dr. Suleiman Suleiman, Executive Director, Institute of Public Communication, and also a former chairman of the Daily Trust editorial board. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Shafi'u.
Yeah, just before you came in, we're looking at some of the responses, even though we're yet to establish contact with the Bauchi State Commissioner of Education, Dr. Mohammed Lawal, but then Kano is still going on with this policy, and then it's also, there were reactions, from the stakeholders, the parents and so on, who believe that, it's certainly going to affect or disrupt, the academic plans and so on. We'll also be looking at the response from Katsina. A while ago I read, they were also defending the policy. But let me get what motivates you perhaps to come up with that compelling piece, looking at this raging debate.
Thank you very much, and good evening, viewers. I think my first motivation was I've lived almost except for maybe 9 years in England. Almost all of my life has been here in Nigeria. I started my primary school in Kano, and then completed it in Niger State. And then from that period up until the time that I left Nigeria in 2007, I was in this country and I hadn't gone anywhere. And I never had of any idea that schools were being closed because of Ramadan. It was quite new to me personally that you're closing schools because of Ramadan. But then again, if you look at the schools, the states that started that policy, Bauchi, Kebbi, Kano, and Katsina. And we have to start with Bauchi State because that's where the policy started, And where the policy started is important because the other states, you can say that it is bandwagon effect, that probably motivated them into doing so. Because once you hear that one state has started and Ramadan is all the states in the country, chances are that other states will want to follow.
Except for Katsina, for instance, because Katsina is saying that it has an existing law in respect to this, so it is not new.
Well, if they have an existing law to that, it's probably, but you and I have been in the news for a long time. When last did you hear that somebody said they were closing down schools for Ramadan? This is the first time for that most of us will be hearing this. And that's really was not just surprising, but also shocking, because these states are among the states with the lowest scores across all the major indices of educational development in the country. If you are looking at the number of students enrollment, that is the number of students who get into primary school or secondary school, or who complete primary school or secondary school, or even the number of students who are able to read and write by the time they complete their primary school, who have the ability to even have that literacy. These states are among the worst in the country. So you expect them to take those indices seriously and to be thinking of how they can resolve problems like this. And this does not mean that they are not doing something. They must be doing something to solve problems like this. But I don't see how closing down schools because of Ramadan helps. And now, if you speak like this, and your name is Suleiman, and you're also a Muslim, also doing Ramadan, it makes people to wonder what he's saying, because the way these arguments are framed, sometimes they are framed in such a way that if you are a Muslim, then you have to support it, because they say that it is for the sake of Ramadan. No, that's not exactly true, because people have to understand, first of all, that fasting for children is not compulsory. It's not mandatory. Who are the people who go to primary school? Those who go to primary school are people between the age 6 to age 11. Up to age 11, even for girls, they have not reached the age of puberty. So they don't need to fast. It's not mandatory, it's not compulsory. You have 11-year-old children in your house. I have 11-year-old children in my house. How many of them are fasting 30 fast in every month. Most of what they do, they try to train, to practice. Some will practice maybe 5 fast, like 10 or 15 or so, but by the time they reach poverty, maybe age of 13 or 14, then it becomes mandatory. And most Muslim children, by the time they are 13 or 14, they have already learned how to fast and are able to fast regardless of whether they are in school or not. So that one is clear.
So if I understand, your perspective, perhaps it could be, just due to political exigency, not because of the necessity in terms of religious obligation.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes, the religious obligation certainly is out, because and we really need to take that seriously, because if there is no mandate in the Quran or there is no mandate in the Hadith, then where is it coming from? And if we ask that question of where is it coming from, then we can answer, say maybe it is politically motivated, or it is, and I will speak about what the political motivations may be later, but I want us to stay on this fact that there is no religious obligation or religious mandate to it in the first instance. Any person who accepts to fast knows that he is doing so for the sake of Allah. And the real point of fasting is endurance, for the Muslim to demonstrate endurance, and tolerance and patience, for the sake of Allah. Also for those who are rich to know what those who are not rich are going through on a daily basis, So it is not something to which you want to say that you want to make it easy for somebody, particularly by disrupting their educational development in order to do. I don't see the religious obligation for that at all. So that one is clear. It is difficult for anybody to come out to say that this is the religious reasons why
they talk about balancing, they talk about balancing spiritual obligation and educational pursuit and all of that. That the idea was to allow, for the spiritual, enough time for the spiritual activity.
Then my answer to that is two. In the first place, people have to understand that going to school is itself a form of worship. Having an education is a form of worship. The very first word revealed in the Quran is read.
Iqra.
That's the very first word. So if somebody understands that if they are going to school, and regardless of any kind of school, whether it is Western education, because you can attend Western education purely for the sake of Allah as well. When you become an engineer and you design buildings, or you become a doctor and treat people, you do all of this, you can do all of this in the name of Allah. You can do journalism in the name of Allah, for goodness sake. So when people go to school, they are also doing so in order to worship. And they will be rewarded for it depending on what their intentions are. So I don't see that if somebody is going to school, then that can be subordinated to fasting. Of course, fasting is a major flank of the Islamic religion, at par with prayer, going to Hajj, zakat, and other things. But going to school, having an education, having knowledge is important in Islam as well. So this is not a question of balance. The only way you can balance this is when you subordinate one to the other, such as what the states are trying to do, and I don't think it's really good for the children.
Is it right to say perhaps that those are the hem of affairs in these states, in spite of their current status in terms of educational development? And take, for instance, Bauchi, accounts for around 45% of the out of school. Currently, looking at the numbers.
Kebbi State is the first. Bauchi, I think if you talking about that, all the top 10 states, 9 of them are in the northeast and the northwest. The 10th one is Niger State. So, and number 1 to number 17, all of them are in northern Nigeria.
So, and Bauchi, for instance, in particular, looking at the numbers, and then, there's the first state that came up with this policy. And again, there are also concerns around the the population, so to speak, the composition of the population, because that's what brought about the religious aspect of it.
Yes.
The intervention of the Christian Association of Nigeria was largely due to the need for equity, fairness, and so on. Do you see justification in what Khan is talking about?
There's absolutely justification for it. We have to be frank with ourselves. If Khan is protesting that Muslim kids are not the only kids in schools, there are kids for whom fasting is not mandatory at all, not just for the children but even for the parents. Fasting is mandatory only for Muslims, self-professed,
especially
Muslims.
The Ramadan one.
Yes,
they do the Lenten period.
Is Ramadan fasting. Thank you. If somebody is not a Muslim, then fasting as we understand it, because there's fasting in other religions as well, but how we conceive fasting in Islam is different from other religions. So fasting as we understand it, and as you said, Ramadan fast is obligatory only on Muslims. So, but not only Muslim children attend school. Even in Kano, Katsina, Kebbi, and Bauchi states, of course, the predominant number of children in those states who are in school or out of school are predominantly Muslims. I think there's no doubt about that. But they are not the only ones who are in school. There are also Christian students who are in school. So if you are saying that there should be no school for 1 month, then it means that it will affect other people who do not, follow this particular religion. So I think the Christian Association of Nigeria, they are justified to raise a voice. However, I'm not exactly sure whether it is Khan that should be making this case. This is where I have disagreement.
Because there's also concern around that, because the response coming from Murik, which is Muslim rights, concern, is also that why making noise out of this? Allow, it affects Muslims and.
Thank you. This is where the politics of all of this thing is, and this is why I think that in Bauchi State, when they were starting this, they knew exactly what they were doing. This is precisely the kind of trap they were setting for Nigerians. They want further divisions in the political system, with a view towards maybe the 2027 elections. Some people want to present themselves as the heroes of the Muslims or as the heroes of the Christians.
There's some sort of, this link with the...
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. Some people want to present themselves to appear like, okay, we are the champions of Islam in this country, and so on and so forth. But this is destructive politics, because if children are left out of school for a period of 1 month, and in the middle of the term, this is crucial, in the middle of the term, had it been you're going into a new term, and then you extend the new term by 1 month, so that children, when they resume, they will be starting a whole new term. Still, I think the impact that can happen will probably be less than this. But students are in the 8th or so week of a 12-week or 13-week term, and then you say that you are closing down schools. For me, it's really a complete disregard for the seriousness that education is in Nigeria. And I think all Muslims need to rise up and fight this, because the children that will be most affected are children of parents who don't have voice in Nigeria. Your children will not be affected, my children will not be affected, It is the children of the ordinary Nigerians whose children are largely in private schools or in this
that is for those that are able to even send them to school, because quite a number are already out of school. Looking at the children that will be affected, over 11 million or so, this is quite a huge number.
That's in Africa, and not just in Africa. If you list the number of countries in the world, you'll be surprised to find that 11 million is a number larger than the population of many countries. As you know, many European countries, Belgium, Sweden, blah, blah, all of these, few of them have a number that are as many as 11 million. And all of these now are not going to have an education for a whole month. And not just that, their education is going to be disrupted. The term is going to be disrupted. There is absolutely no way that this will not have negative impacts.
And quite a number are also preparing for exams. Some preparing for secondary examination, and others for junior secondary examination. How
particularly for those who will be writing WAEC, because that's another metric that you can use to measure educational performance. If you look at in 2024, the states with the highest WAEC performance, for example, the top 10, there's not a single northern Nigerian state among the top 10. So, and you are now having 4 states from the north saying that they are breaking up school for something that is not really necessary. Frankly, it beats my imagination, and I think Muslim leaders should rise up against this. But unfortunately, I don't even see that this is something that religious leaders should speak about. I see it as something that civil society organizations, something that government, political parties, government organizations ought to see. For example, if Bauchi State, Kano State, Katsina State, and Kebbi State are making this policy, we have the Nigerian Governors Forum. Can't the Nigerian Governors Forum come out and speak against it the way they did, because it's a policy, it's government action.
Perhaps the tax, the
tax bill.
It
we
generated
have
a lot
the political parties. Is it the position of APC or PDP or NNPP that schools will be closed down? Is it in their manifestos?
Is it also part of their manifestos?
Is it part of their manifestos? These are the agencies that should come out and talk. The ASU, Academic Staff Union of Universities, you can't
the
do
teachers, the NUT,
universities, NUT, the National Union of Teachers. These are the bodies. I was happy to hear that the NANS, National Association of Nigerian Students, were going to protest, although I would have loved to see that they engaged the governors directly, even before the protest. I would have loved to see them having a sit down with the governor of Bauchi State, having a sit down with the governor of Katsina State and all these other states, and telling them in facts and figures the dangers of such a policy, and so on. So I prefer that these organizations and these bodies should be the ones that are defending or rejecting
but some would say,
policies, rather than religious
some would
organizations.
say that there's clear-cut demarcation as to what the level of interference now. States are independent and can run their independent policies and so on. But then you talk about the importance of having
but that itself is an erroneous position. In Nigeria, and it's there in the constitution, the federal government has supremacy of policy making. And this is government policy. So if somebody comes out and say we are doing this because states are independent, he is really, really just saying it. It's not true. Is this policy consistent with the national policy on education in Nigeria? If it is not, then from there and then it becomes null and void. Do states have their own WAEC bodies? Do they have their own separate curricula? No. Do they have their own examination bodies like JAMB and so on and so forth? States have state universities, but do they have a different from what the Nigerian Universities Commission determines? So when it comes to policy, not only in education, but also in health, in sports, in economy, in virtually every aspect of governance, it is the federal government that has supremacy over policy making in the country. And usually what the federal government does is to come out with a general document that is, large enough to enable states to have their own differences within it, but also firm enough to ensure that you cannot go outside of this. This policy has gone outside of the national policy on education.
Could it be also as a result of the sensitivity of religion? For instance, even the federal government sometimes find it a bit difficult to interfere when it comes to religious issues and all of that. We've seen what happened during the Sharia implementation and how it snowballed into something else. When states are beginning to think that we want to do this and the federal government is saying no, and in the end, it has to prevail because of the laws and all of that, the framework. But then coming back to,
but this is not this. I don't. The federal government can feel the sensitivity of these issues, but when you are confronted with controversy, silence is not necessarily the best answer to address a controversy. Sometimes you have to, come out and take a position. And if the federal government really wants to take a position now, it is the position of the students, of the school children that that the federal government
they also have their rights.
This is clear cut.
Education is their
absolutely.
Right.
This is clear cut. Because the damage, many students will probably not even return to school at all, because in the first instance, students are struggling to stay in the school in the first place. This is why I said in my article that if the state governors really want to help students or in the states, one of the things they can do is to intensify the Ramadan feeding in schools.
Yes, I was
for both students as well as for teachers.
Yes.
Certainly, teachers will need the additional support that will come, and they are the ones who are most likely going to be fasting, or at least in almost all the teachers who are Muslim, you would expect them to fast, except where they have extenuating circumstances that are allowed. So school feeding for teachers will support teachers during Ramadan, but also for children, because the school feeding has been found to be quite an attractive policy that helps to attract students to school.
How it increased the numbers, at the point the government is implementing, quite a number of parents were able to bring out their children, and then the enrollment also rose as a result of that intervention.
Yes.
So if genuinely the states are actually interested in religion, or in promoting religious values, or in trying to support, the parents, what they need to do is perhaps to come up with those integral aspects, the feeding arrangements and so on.
Absolutely, and they are more likely to even get targeted people, because, for example, most schools in northern Nigeria, the children are classed, public schools to be specific, they are classed among students who would need the school feeding, because majority of the students, the children in public schools in northern states are from rather lower income, and vulnerable backgrounds. So if the government use schools to distribute Ramadan feeding, it's probably going to be more effective than the one they do outside, which goes to just about anybody, and you don't know, they spend billions on that, and you don't know who gets it.
In most cases, to even political,
to people closer to the corridors of power, rather than the actual people who need it. But if you are using schools, that would be a very effective way of targeting the poor who need feeding support during Ramadan. So if state governors want to do this, I think they can do that. But what they have done is where we are now. A situation where the whole debate has turned into Muslims versus Christians, or Christians against Muslims, or Muslims against, which is rather unfortunate, because education of children is not something that can be left to these kinds of controversies. It is something that we need in the north, particularly. Already we were at disadvantage. We didn't have enough of it. We have not had enough of it.
The concern is perhaps the North accounts for more than 80% of the total out of school number. Some say around 24 million.
No, they are about 18 million, between 15 to 18 million, as they say. Last month, the federal government, or I think sometime in this year, the federal government was trying to be clever by half, by claiming that if you are an Al-Majri, you are no longer an out-of-school child.
Because you are going through
pretending that, that I wrote about that as well, and I thought that this is really trying to be clever by half, but it's very dangerous, because you are going to put the future of children at risk. It is best to leave the definition that they are out of school children, even if this government is not able to deal with the issue, as previous governments have not been able to deal with the issue. Who knows, maybe tomorrow God will give us a government that will take that matter seriously and address it.
Why shouldn't it even be a national issue, a national emergency? We're talking about education, and we are seeing the impact, of this out of school crisis, you know, how it is tied to our insecurity and all of that. Why shouldn't the government take it as a national emergency that need to be addressed?
It's also again part of how we understand security. You know, we have a rather narrow understanding of security, which is based on arms and fight and things like that, instead of, you know, a broader definition. You know,
even the
any
recruitment
society
line is also,
that has up to 18 million children not in school, that society is sitting on a time bomb, and one day it's going to blast, you know, explode, because children are like a slate. You know, it is what you put into them that they will grow up with, you know. So if you don't put anything valuable or useful into them, you are going to get the outcome of that. So I agree that it's a national emergency, but then again, it re-emphasizes why such a policy like closing schools during Ramadan is not what Nigeria or even those states need at this point. You know, as soon as Bauchi states did it, I was kind of confident that other states are likely to follow, even when they are not ready for it. Even when they have not, yes, even when they have not sat down to think carefully about it. You know, because if it will piss somebody off, maybe if it will piss Khan off, or maybe if it will piss somebody off in the south, for that reason, some people will support it, because, you know, that's the politics about it. It's what I was trying to say. The politics of religion is disagreement for the sake of disagreement. You know, Muslims disagree with Christians for the sake of disagreement. Christians disagree with Muslims for the sake of disagreement. Not that people disagree because they want to understand each other, or because they, you know, no. People disagree merely because they want to be disagreeable, you know. So what that means is that if you take a position, then if you take position A, I am duty and you are Muslim, then I am duty bound to take the opposite of that position, even if the opposite is not necessarily, you know, what is in my best interest. That's exactly where we are now in the country. You find a situation where merely because the state government that are doing this are Muslim-dominated states, majority of the Muslims feel duty-bound to support the policy, even though supporting it is not necessarily what is in their best interest, not in the best interest of Islam, nor in the best interest of Ramadan, or Muslims, or the children that were in question, but because it is against what the Christians want, you know. The same, you know, tomorrow you are going to have a situation where indeed that's why Khan itself is the one responding. Otherwise, this is educational.
This also applied to issues around, you know, hijab, wearing, and all of that.
Exactly.
You know, when it comes up, you find out that also, you know, the Muslim groups are, you know.
In fact, to buttress this, a few weeks ago, I was chatting with an elder statesman, because he sent me an article on WhatsApp where somebody was saying that a group somewhere was saying that a southern group somewhere was saying that they want Nigeria to leave Organization of Islamic Countries, OIC. You know, I don't know if you saw that news. It didn't.
It has been a raging debate.
Yes, it didn't. You know, just a few weeks ago, it didn't go anywhere. And also, if you have been following, you would have noticed a few weeks back there was also there were stories in the news that Ekiti State or Ondo State, they say they don't want Sharia practiced in those states. You know, and I was saying that. When he sent me this news, I said, when I saw the Ekiti, I was just laughing. And now this one, I feel like somebody is trying to bring back the old, you know, divisions. Because before this issue of school, Nigerians had become tired of being disunited.
You know, along those religious lines.
Yes, you could see agreement against the government about, fuel subsidy removal, about the economic situation. You could see that whether you are Muslim or not, whether you are South or people were, kind of like coming together to, so this issue is
because
now
poverty doesn't segregate.
Exactly, all of us buy fuel at the same amount. So people had become, kind of tired of being disunited.
Right.
Now this one is bringing back that issue of unity, because as soon as I saw the policy on Twitter and on Facebook, I noticed that a lot of people were taking sides merely along the religious lines, which was rather unfortunate.
Okay, so what needs to be done now? Because trying to get even the people, those behind the policies or implementing the policies is becoming extremely difficult. Take for instance the Bauchi State. We've been trying to get across to the Commissioner of Education since morning. He's been trying to track, and he gave his commitment that he's going to be part of the program, but he's yet to join it. So is it because that they have nothing to say to defend the policy, or is it that they are also...
First of all, you asked what should be done now. I think that's an important question.
Right.
But before I come there, I will address that one. I don't know why, I cannot speak for him, why they have not come. They may have good reasons for not showing up. But to be honest, a policy such as this will be very difficult to defend and reasonably in the public space, which again shows that the rightness or wrongness of the policy is not why they did it. Maybe there are other motives for why.
It shows that it's an unpopular policy.
Exactly, and so on. But the issue of what to be done is a little more complex, because for these states, this decision has already been taken.
Exactly.
Whatever we do now, some disruption has already come into the system. And some effects, negative impacts, would have, ensued for those kids that are in school. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But I feel that the policy still has to be rescinded in those states,
And you think that would happen? Because looking at...
That's where I'm going.
Take for instance, Katsina.
That's where I'm going.
Yes.
It has to be some kind of critical engagement with the states and their leaders. There has to be some constructive engagement with them. The approach taken by Khan and the Nans that protest or going to court, these things are okay because people have right to protest, people have right to go to court. But I don't think that's useful in a situation
even the
like
Christian
this.
Association of Nigeria is also contemplating instituting a legal action.
That's what I'm saying. That they can't go into court, or NANS, that is Nigerian Association, National Association of Nigerian Students, protesting. These things are valid. They are useful. Is their constitutional right to do. Nobody is against it. But whether they can have the desired impact of getting the policy rescinded, I'm not so sure. Because they are more like combative approach to problem solving. What I would prefer is a more constructive engagement with these governors. I would like to see political parties. I would like to see civil society organizations. I would like to see the Nigerian Union of Teachers. I would like to see
the Parents Association.
Parents, a PTA association, national. Engaging or private schools and secondary schools. ANCOPS, the National Association of Principals of Schools. And so on and so forth. Engaging these governors, in constructive dialogue with a view towards pointing out how dangerous and how really terrible such a policy would be for the school children. And to speak of school children as school children, rather than speak of school children as Muslim children or Christian children. For when will we go beyond this kind of levels in Nigeria? Just as school children. It doesn't matter whether they are Muslims or not. Just school children. That this policy will be detrimental to our children who are in schools. And that's all.
Irrespective of the religion
whether they are Muslims
profess,
or not, And then you come up with reasonable justifications for why, with facts and figures, for why these policies will be there. Because the governors have already taken a high position. So for them to come down from that position, you have to give them soft landing. If you don't give them soft landing, they will insist only for the sake of saving FASMA, just because they don't want to be seen as having capitulated. You know, they will insist even when they know that this is the wrong position to take. So the approach for dialogue has to be dialogic, has to be based on, you know, constructive engagement of these people, you know, and mobilizing all the stakeholders, not just religious bodies, you know, because if Khan is saying one thing and Murik is saying another thing, then it becomes another religious conflict in the country. I'm not happy about this.
In fact, there are some that are more even critical. We're talking about the parents, for instance, who are directly affected.
Who are directly affected, you know. So you don't leave the part, and this is unfortunately the problem with Nigeria today. The political space has been left open to religious leaders and religious organizations. Political space. So the religious organizations and religious leaders, they dominate the religious space, you know, but that's not enough. They also dominate the political space.
And they're beginning to see even taking political responsibility.
This is exactly what I'm saying. You know, they dominate political space, you know, which shouldn't be the case. The political space has its own actors. The religious space has its own actors. The religious leaders and religious organizations like Murik and Khan and so on should be, by and large, you know, confined to the religious space. The political space has actors like media, actors like civil society organizations, policy makers, government, political parties, you know, and so on and so forth. I think those ones should not leave the space. The religious organization can participate in the political space, yes, but they shouldn't be the ones calling the shots. Everything is decided by religious leaders or religious organizations, you know, because the politics are...
Our time is up, but I would have loved to also add this, talking about, you know, the civil society groups. We have some who are, you know, coming out, you know, to speak on behalf of Nigerians when it comes to the economic rights. You know, like the Serap and so on. Perhaps this is also an area they should,
where they can, and speak as you know, for Nigeria and for Nigerian interest and for the interest of Nigerian children, rather than to classify children as Muslim children or Christian.
Especially that it affects, you know, rights. You know, they're also fundamental rights. Thank you very much, Dr. Suleiman Suleiman, for talking to us. We've been trying to link up with Dr. Mohammed Lawal, but we couldn't, and due to, you know, factors beyond our control, actually. But we hope to get to engage with them, you know, including others like Katsina and Kano, who have gone up, you know, with the implementation of this policy. Would I want them to come forward also to provide their line of reasoning as to why this should be the route to go. Thank you very much, Dr. Suleiman Suleiman.
Thank you very much.
Executive Director, Institute of Public Communication.
Thank you.
And also a former Chairman, Editorial Board of the Daily Trust. Thank you very much for
Thank you, Shafi'u, for having me, and thank you to our audiences for being with us today.
We appreciate it. And viewers, that's a wrap on today's edition of Daily Politics. You can join us tomorrow. We'll be back with another interesting topic and personalities. Until then, on behalf of the technical crew, my name is Shafi'u Suleiman. Many thanks for being there.